Hello, this is Mateo, and I am the Youth Program Coordinator at Rainbow Resource Center. And so today we're going to be talking about Transgender Awareness Week. Okay, so thanks for joining me. And today we will be covering the basics, which is really just some helpful terms that'll help your learning about today's topic, which is transgender awareness. So some terminology that you'll be hearing. We're going to be talking about who transgender people are. We're also going to be sharing stories and experiences. Well, you're going to be listening to me talk about the importance of sharing stories and experiences. And then we're also going to be looking at allyship and advocacy. So let's get started. Okay, so the basics. So the 2S LGBTQ plus community is a wonderfully diverse community. There are a variety of ways of expressing how we experience our gender and sexuality. While we won't be covering every aspect of gender expression and identity, but we will be covering some helpful terms to guide your learning and understanding of who transgender people are. So let's get started. So in this slide, the first term is transgender. So it's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or gender expression differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. So people under the transgender umbrella may describe themselves using one or more of a variety of terms, including transgender. So a transgender identity is not determined by physical appearance or medical procedures. The next term on this list on this slide is gender non-conforming. So people whose gender expression is different from conventional expectations of masculinity and femininity. So one thing to remember is that not all gender nonconforming people identify as transgender, and not all transgender people are gender nonconforming. And the final term on this slide is cisgender, which is a term used by some to describe people who are not transgender. So we'll be moving on to the next slide. So in this slide, the first term is gender expression. So which is how gender is expressed through a person's name, pronouns, clothing, haircut, behavior, voice, and or body characteristics. So some transgender people seek to align their gender expression with their gender identity rather than the sex they were assigned at birth. The next definition on this slide is gender identity. So this is a person's deeply held sense of their gender. So for transgender people, their gender identity does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. Some people identify as a man or woman, or boy or girl, but for some people, their gender identity does not fit neatly into one of those two choices. And sometimes they may refer to themselves as non-binary and or genderqueer. Unlike gender expression, gender identity is not visible to others. So I just want to speak to how important it is for us not to make assumptions about people's gender identity, because that is essentially not something we can really comment on. That is something people can share with us. So again, so important for us not to make assumptions about who we think people are. So the last term on this slide is sexual orientation. And sexual orientation describes a person's physical, romantic, and or emotional attraction to another person. So gender identity and sexual orientation are not the same. Transgender people may be straight, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer. So to sum that up, sexual orientation is really very separate from gender expression and gender identity. They're very, very different things. Okay, on this next slide, we have two terms. The first one is gender dysphoria. So that is a term that describes a sense of unease that a person may have because of a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity. I do want to make a statement, which is gender dysphoria is not felt by every transgender person. And every transgender person who may experience gender dysphoria may not experience it in the same way. So everyone has a very different relationship with their bodies. Therefore, their experiences will be different from someone else's in terms of how they connect with their body or don't connect with their body. So again, let's not make any assumptions regarding how people experience gender dysphoria, or even how they experience their gender. So the next term is transition. So you may hear that term a lot, transition. One thing I do want to point out is avoid using the phrase sex change. That's not a thing. If anything, it's kind of insulting because there is no magic surgery or that will just kind of change things for people. And again, we'll get into it. I don't want to get too into it anyway. So transition is a process that occurs over a long period of time. So transition can include some or all of the following personal, medical, and legal steps I'm about to share. So a transition can involve telling one's family and friends and coworkers, in other words, a coming out. Um, Transition can involve using a different name and new pronouns. It could involve dressing differently, changing one's name and or sex on legal documents. Sometimes it includes hormone therapy. So some people may start taking uh, estrogen or testosterone to kind of help them change into who they want to be medically. Um, and possibly, but not always, one or more types of surgery. So the exact steps involved in transition vary from person to person. So not all transgender people have surgeries. Some people have a lot of surgeries. Some people have one or two. Everyone has a different transitional goal. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we're done talking about some basic terms, we're going to get into who transgender people are. So many people believe that there is a new transgender phenomenon and that this is a passing fad. But what some people don't know is that transgender people have existed for as long as humans have been around. Transgender people come from around the world, from every racial and ethnic background, and from every faith community. So transgender people are your classmates, your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends. We are everywhere. We're people. So I made a little collage here. I wish I can, uh, I wish this can be bigger, honestly, but I'm trying to make this within a small time frame. So I'm just going to go over who these people are, but I will be sharing like some of these people's social medias. So in the more section of information for this video below, you can then go ahead and take a look at how to learn more about these people if you're interested. But I will be sharing with you their names, but I'm not going to go into too much detail. But I encourage you to take a closer look at who some of these amazing people are. So from the top left, the lovely person with the flowers in their hair, that is Alok. The next person to that person on the right is Jennings. And then the next two people, I wish I made that picture a little bigger. It's Joshua Whitehead and Arielle Twist. So Arielle Twist, their background is is orange. So just a step further down. So the next row from the top left, we have Rain Dove. Rain Dove is wearing a white buttoned up shirt that is opened. Um, and right next to their photograph is, let me take a look here. Yeah, it's Patti Harrison. So she has long brown hair. And then next people over, it's a group shot of like 5 very cool looking people. And that is some of the cast from a show called Pose. So the first person on the left is Hailie Sahar. Then we have Indya Moore. Next to Indya Moore is Dominique Jackson. Next to Dominique is Angelica Ross. And the last person in that group shot is MJ Rodriguez. Definitely encourage you to take a look at their Instagrams. And next, this fellow without a shirt on, that is Laith Ashley. So now we're going to move on to the last kind of the next row. It's not really a row, so bear with me here. So the last 2 rows from the left is Benjamin Melzer, and he is wearing glasses and a knit sweater. Next to him is Lavern Cox. Next to Lavern Cox is Ryan Cassata. And then back to the bottom left, we have Trace Lysette. Next to Trace Lysette, we have Chella Man. Next to Chella Man, we have Jari Jones. She, as you can see, was a model for Calvin Klein. And next to her, last but not least, we do have Kenny Ethan Jones. So all these people are just a very little snapshot of who transgender people are, and they all have incredible accomplishments because they're amazing people. So there's so many more people I would have loved to share, but unfortunately, I just don't have the time and the space to do that. So we're just gonna move on. Let's see here. Okay, so here I have a video. So this is sharing stories and experiences. So this is a video called Transvisibility, and it's a short motivational video featuring some of the brightest and most inspiring advocates, activists, and faces from the trans community. So we're gonna watch a little video.
Do you want me to go first?
Pre-transition, my biggest fears and worries were basically I had no idea what I was doing. One person's transition is not the same to everybody else's. So yeah, it was scary. I mean, you don't know what you're going to look like. You're kind of going on hope.
No matter what I did in life, no matter where I went, I was never going to be accepted for who I wanted to be.
I didn't know how to tell my family, and because religion played a major part in my life and my family's life, I just thought that it would be something that I was going to keep to myself and never really get a chance to do. Just probably live miserably in my corner.
My biggest fear, actually, my biggest concern was that when I transitioned, no one was ever going to want to date me again. That was my biggest fear, and it put me off for a good, probably a couple of years.
I didn't think that I'd be able to carry on with my careers. I thought I'd have a lot of trouble getting jobs. As far as the jobs and the being a productive human being thing, that was completely unfounded.
Physically, honestly, it's my nose.
Am I looking okay? Which is a very big, kind of broad thing, but it just generally just boils down to just living, just not putting too much weight on how I look and just getting on with life.
Well, one, my hairline.
So at the beginning of my transition, like a year ago, I'd notice every single mannerism, every look, everything that people would do towards me, and I would assign like negativity to that.
For me, it's lower surgery. I've learned to do certain things to help me feel more comfortable and not as dysphoric, but every now and then it causes its problems.
My biggest insecurity is definitely my voice. It's a low voice, and as much as I'm trying to train it, it's just not. It always outs me as being trans. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You just recognise it. Just like I recognise someone for being tall or short.
Love yourself, then it is very corny, but if you love yourself, then you're going to just attract love.
Not to fear their transition. It was a really positive thing. Every day I got to see myself grow to the person I knew I wanted to be more and more. So actually just embrace that transition.
Know that you will be alright, and if I could have transitioned 10 years earlier, then I would have loved to do that, because I sort of feel like there was so much time in my life waiting to kind of get to this point where I'm happy, that I sort of almost have lost 10 years where everyone else was kind of living a normal productive life.
It's great to ask for help, it's great to ask for support, but the one support system you need is yourself. You book those surgeries, you book those doctor's appointments, you rely on you.
I never thought that I was going to get to this place where I'm happy, where I walk down the street feeling happy, where I look in a mirror and I feel happy. For me, it's not really that hard to stay positive, because I just realise, how lucky we are, to even be here, really.
Yeah,
so there we go.
Surround yourself with good people, whether those be your colleagues, your family, your friends, people who understand and accept you for who you are. That way, when you have something in your life that throws you off balance, you've got the right road to catch you.
Like, I definitely set goals. If you set a peg in the future,
You see yourself growing as you reach that peg.
Yeah.
You accomplish it, and you see another one, and all of a sudden you look 5 pegs back, and look how much you've grown.
If people would just understand that, we're humans just like everyone else, and that our experiences are shared and they're universal, we wouldn't have the issues that we have today, really.
Definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for watching that video with me. So those are just some experiences and stories from some trans folks. Again, I wish we had more time to kind of share other stories and experiences, because there's so many different perspectives out there and how people do experience their transition and overall experiences as people. So we're gonna move forward.
Do you want me to go first?
That's not what I meant to do. Okay, so now we're going to look at allyship. And so there is a visual on the left. I'm just going to read what it says there. And it reads, I understand that I will never be able to understand completely, but I stand with you and I will not let you do this alone. You were never meant to. So it's like a really beautiful statement of what allyship could look like. So I'm just going to share some of the points that I have here on the right side of the page or slide. So the first one, allyship is not just a description, it is also about taking action. The next point, there is no one way to be an ally. People are diverse and complex. This means that different members of the transgender community have different needs and priorities. The fourth point, allyship is about listening, not talking. If you want to actively be supportive, you need to start by really hearing how people want to be supportive. And the last point on this slide, there is no one right way to handle every situation or interact with every trans person. Be respectful, do your best, and keep trying. So those are some guidelines on what allyship can look like. Okay, so I found another short video to share with you folks. So again, it's centering around allyship, and this video is titled, What is Performative Allyship? So these are some community members who some may or may not be trans, but I think they make some really solid points, so I felt it was like really worth sharing. So they're just gonna talk a little bit about what a good ally looks to them. So I'm just gonna hit play.
We don't need fake people. We need people who are honest and true and can help us. Performative allyship is when, you go to all of these happy events like gay pride, heck, even in like a gay club, and you say, oh my gosh, I love LGBTQ people. And then, when the serious stuff happens and we need people out there like in the streets protesting or writing to senators, if you're not there too, then you're not really an ally to us.
Performative allyship looks like reaping the benefits of queerness, like going to gay parades and then not sending me a text when horrific incidents like Pulse happened. This was especially something that I struggled with after the horrific and violent incident that occurred in Orlando. I was really struggling to breathe. I was viscerally shaken, and I had all these friends that I had planned to go to the Pride Parade with, and none of them texted me asking me if I was okay, and I think that's what performative allyship is.
Performative allyship is doing something for showmanship and for credit. It's easy to retweet something that may give the idea that you're an ally, but being an ally means being able to engage, being able to act, and being able to listen.
A lot of people stick to this hashtag activism. They'll post love is love, but if you're not doing anything to make that statement reality, then it's truly just 3 words. We need people who are there, on the computer and off of it. You have to be there for the good and the bad. You can't just be there when it's most convenient for you, because we don't have a choice.
Okay, well, thank you so much for watching that video with me. I hope that gave you a really good idea of what allyship should look like, and definitely what it shouldn't look like. Yeah, so make sure to just follow some of those guidelines and just be genuine with how you want to be an ally. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next slide. It may play the video. Let's see what happened.
We don't need fake people.
Whoops, my apologies. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk a little bit more about allyship before we end the little PowerPoint. So the first paragraph here, I'm just gonna read it. Continue to educate yourself. One of the simplest ways to be a strong ally is to take your education into your own hands. It's important to have conversations with the trans people in your life, but it's also important for you to seek out resources and information on your own. Uh, so yeah, it's like super important to be aware of the hardships and discrimination the trans community does face. But for trans people, it can be very exhausting to educate others on their on what they face on a regular basis. So be mindful of yeah, having those conversations, but also knowing people's boundaries, because it can be really exhausting to go over with someone, how hard things can be for them. So on to the next paragraph. You don't have to understand someone's identity to respect it. Some people haven't heard a lot about transgender identity or have trouble understanding what it means to be trans, and that's okay. But all people, even those whose identities you don't fully understand, deserve respect. The last paragraph reads, you can't always tell if somebody is transgender simply by looking at them. Many people expect that they'll just know when someone is trans and may be surprised to learn that this isn't always true. Since there is no one transgender experience, there is no one way for transgender people to look either. This also means that transgender people may be in groups or gatherings that you attend without you knowing it, making it important to be an outspoken ally and supporter, even in spaces that you think don't have any transgender people in them. On to the next slide. Okay, so advocacy. So what can you do? So essentially, advocacy is allyship in action. So advocacy is any action that argues for a cause, supports, or defends on behalf of others. So think critically. Think about what you can do to help advocate for more supportive and inclusive environments. How can you help make positive changes in the environments you're in? So that can be like school, if you have a job, that can be your workplace, that can be in your friend group, that can be within your family. Um, so sometimes it's helpful for trans folks to have allies do some advocating, and that can include educating people on some of the issues that trans folks face. Um, Another point here is, does your school or workplace have policies that help transgender folks feel safe? If not, what needs to change? And that can be maybe, advocating for gender neutral washrooms in your school or workplace if those don't currently exist. So if you're in school, it may be helpful to join your school's GSA. If your school doesn't have a GSA, think about starting one. For those who may not know what a GSA is, GSA stands for Gender Sexuality Alliance. So it's where allies and students from the community, meet. It's kind of like a club. It depends on like what it looks like in your school, because sometimes they look a little different, but you can do activities, you can talk about some issues facing the wider 2S LGBTQ plus community, but it's also like a safe place more than anything. So that's kind of it. So just remember that all people deserve to feel safe and respected, and that includes trans people, but also includes everyone. I think everyone deserves a space to feel good and safe. So I'm just going to share with you my references. So that is where I got my information. You can see this here, but I'll also be posting that to the information about the video. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful in guiding your learning and giving you some information. And if you're already aware of most of the stuff, thanks for tuning in for the refresher. So again, I will be posting all the information, including the people I shared in that little collage, as well as I'll share some links for the 2 videos we watched. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. You can see my little face. So thanks again, and keep in tune for whatever else we're gonna have in the future. Next week, November 20th is Trans Day of Remembrance, so we will be posting a video about that, so you can learn a little bit about TDOR. And I hope you're doing well. See you later.